Have you ever noticed that some of the most interesting people you know barely exist online? No profile picture updates, no vacation photo dumps, no mirror selfies or carefully curated feed? Just absence. A digital silence in a world that won't stop talking. There's something strange about choosing invisibility in an age of constant visibility. We live in a time when documenting your life has become almost synonymous with living it. If you didn't post it, did it even happen? And here's the paradox. In a culture that equates sharing with caring, presence with value, visibility with success, the people who choose not to post their photos aren't necessarily hiding. They're not antisocial or out of touch. Often they're just operating from a completely different understanding of what matters. So what's really happening in the psychology of people who don't post their photos on social media? And what does their digital silence reveal about how they see themselves in the world? For some people, not posting photos is about maintaining what psychologists call self-concept clarity, a stable, consistent sense of who you are that isn't dependent on external validation. Think about what happens when you post a photo. You're not just sharing an image. You're offering yourself up for evaluation, for judgment, for the world to weigh in on your appearance, your life, your choices. And then you wait. You check. How many likes? Who commented? Your sense of how good that photo is, how good you look, how interesting your life seems, becomes tied to the response it receives. Dr. Ethan Kross's research at the University of Michigan shows that passive social media use decreases well-being. But active posting can be just as psychologically complex, especially when your self-worth becomes contingent on the feedback you receive. For people who don't post, there's often an implicit recognition of this dynamic. They've decided they don't want their self-perception filtered through the lens of social media metrics. They don't want to need the likes. They don't want their sense of self to be crowdsourced. And here's what's fascinating. This isn't about confidence or lack thereof. It's about where you locate your sense of identity. Internal versus external. Self-defined versus socially validated. But here's where it gets complex. Some people don't post photos because they understand something fundamental about human psychology. Mystery is power. When you don't share everything, people become curious. When you're not constantly visible, your presence becomes more meaningful. Think about the difference between someone whose entire life is documented on Instagram versus someone you only see in person. Who feels more mysterious, more intriguing? Social psychologist Robert Cialdini's research on scarcity shows that we value things more when they're rare, less accessible. When you're not constantly available, constantly visible, constantly sharing, you become more valuable in people's perception. But this isn't manipulation. It's boundary setting. The person who doesn't post photos often has a clear sense of what belongs to them and what belongs to the world. Their face, their body, their private moments, these aren't content. These aren't currency. These are theirs, and they're keeping them that way. Now let's talk about something at the heart of why many people don't post. They've recognized that social media isn't really social. It's performance. Every photo you post is a tiny production. You're not just capturing a moment. You're curating it, editing it, crafting a narrative around it. And this performance requires constant self-consciousness. You can't just exist in moments anymore. You have to think about how they'll look to others. You have to be both participant and director. Dr. Sherry Turkle's research on digital culture reveals that this performance orientation fundamentally changes how we experience our own lives. We start choosing experiences based on how they'll photograph. We start living for the story we can tell rather than the life we can live. For people who don't post photos, there's often a quiet rebellion against this. They want to be fully present in their lives, not half present, while also thinking about content. And here's the thing, this isn't about being anti-technology or superior to those who do post. It's about recognizing a cost they're not willing to pay. The cost of fragmentation, the cost of living your life as if it's always being watched. But we need to talk about the other side of this because the psychology isn't always empowering. Sometimes not posting photos comes from fear. Fear of judgment, fear of not being attractive enough, interesting enough, successful enough, fear that your life won't measure up. The social comparison theory shows that we constantly evaluate ourselves relative to others. And social media has turned comparison into a 24/7 activity. Everyone else looks happier, more attractive, more successful. So for some people, not posting isn't a choice. It's a retreat. It's easier to not participate than to participate and feel inadequate. It's safer to be invisible than to be visible and judged. And this is where it gets really interesting psychologically, because the same behavior, not posting photos, can come from completely opposite places. One person's boundary is another person's barrier. One person's intentional privacy is another person's anxious avoidance. The question isn't whether you post or don't post. The question is, why? Are you protecting your peace, or are you protecting yourself from potential rejection? Are you maintaining privacy, or are you hiding? Here's where the psychology gets particularly nuanced. People who don't post photos often have a complicated relationship with attention. It's not that they don't want to be seen. It's that they want to be seen differently, fully, truly, in complexity, rather than in curated fragments. Think about the difference between attention on social media versus attention in real life. Online attention is thin, scattered, quantifiable. A like, a quick comment, a momentary glance before scrolling to the next thing. But real attention? Real attention is someone looking you in the eyes and really listening. Someone asking how you are and waiting for the true answer. Dr. Shimi Kong's research on motivation shows that humans need authentic connection, not just validation. And for many people who don't post photos, social media attention feels empty, hollow, insufficient. So they opt out, not because they don't need connection, but because they're looking for it somewhere else, in real conversations, real presence, real relationships that exist beyond the screen. So what does it feel like to not post photos in a world that expects you to? For some, it feels like freedom, like breathing room, like reclaiming ownership of your own image, your own life, your own narrative. There's something profoundly liberating about living without constantly thinking about how your life will translate to social media. About eating a beautiful meal without photographing it first. About going somewhere stunning and just experiencing it. When you're not performing your life, you get to just live it. Messy, unfiltered, unwitnessed by anyone except the people actually present. And here's the truth. Some of the most meaningful moments in life are the ones that never get shared. The quiet conversations, the private joys, the experiences that belong only to you. Social media convinces us that if something isn't shared, it didn't matter. But the people who don't post know differently. The best things often happen in the spaces between posts, in the gaps of visibility, in the privacy we protect. Remember that question we started with? Why do some of the most interesting people barely exist online? Maybe it's because they understand that existing and being seen aren't the same thing, that a life lived doesn't require an audience, that mystery is more interesting than constant availability. Or maybe they're just tired, tired of performing, tired of curating, tired of reducing their complex, beautiful, messy lives into consumable content. And here's what I need you to hear. Your choice about visibility is valid. Whether you post every day or haven't updated your profile picture in years, you get to decide. You don't owe the world your image. You don't owe anyone documentation of your life. You don't have to prove you're living by constantly showing evidence of your existence. The people who don't post their photos aren't hiding. They're not missing out. They're just choosing to exist differently, fully present, deeply engaged, quietly certain that their worth isn't measured in likes. Their beauty isn't validated by comments. Their lives aren't made real by being shared. They're living in the spaces between visibility and invisibility, finding freedom in the choice to be seen only by those who truly look. And maybe that's not absence at all. Maybe that's the most intentional kind of presence.